Gen Tang is the third formula, so it's a really interesting formula. Its basis is Tang plus Ma Huang and Gergen. It's not Ma Huang Tang plus, it's basically a Tang, so it's a deficient patient, Tang base, so aversion to cold, Tai Yang formula, but it's got the addition of a Yangming herb, which is Gergen. So there's been some debate over the 2,000 years or whatever about why Zhang Zhongjing says that this has a Yangming component to it, but we could take it that the Gergen addition is the Yangming herb, because we know the other herbs are more Tai Yang herbs like Ma Huang and Guizhi, whereas the Gergen treats the stiffness of the back of the neck. So the Gergen specifically does treat tightness and stiffness of the upper trapezius muscle. So you'll feel from the neck down to the top of the shoulders as tightness and stiffness. Below that point down the back of the neck is more Tianhua Fen in the technique chapter of the Jingui. So just stiffness of the upper neck, you're looking at Gergen Tang. So Gergen Tang is the chief herb in this. It's so what's happened in this patient is they are deficient. You'll see Gergen Tang, which is used in Japan, called Kokonto, which is their #1 selling herbal formula that you can buy in any pharmacy in Japan. Kokonto, it's very, very widely used as a frontline treatment for viruses, cold and flu. Now this cold and flu has no cough, has no sore throat. You're just looking at aversion to cold and a stiff neck and stiff joints. So aversion to cold, aversion to wind, stiff neck and stiff joints. Your pulse will be floating and tight. So in the Gao Hui Lu's book, where he talks about Gergen Tang, there's a little chapter, a little quote from Dan Bensky saying, what's the pulse? And Dan Bensky says that the pulse is floating and tight in the chun on the side where the neck is the most stiff. So again, a tight pulse feels like a wiry pulse, but it has more of a square quality, and it's as it's tight, it means it's like a tightened rope, and and it also has a little left to right flicking kind of action to differentiate it from a wiry pulse. It feels a bit like a wiry pulse, but a wiry pulse has a little zingy kind of feeling to it, so it's slightly different. So that'll be in the chun pulse, as it's the upper pulse, dealing with the upper part of the body, as opposed to the middle jiao or the lower jiao in the third pulse. So chun pulse, tight, worse on the side of the tight neck, so he says. And I also find that. So Gergen Tang, brilliant formula, often used, probably much more likely to use that on the first 1 or 2 days of a cold than Ma Huang Tang or Guizhi Tang. Again, in Australia, can't use Ma Huang, which is really annoying, but there is a formula which is Guizhi Gergen Tang, which is just Guizhi Tang plus Gergen, works pretty well too. So you can use Guizhi Gergen Tang, which is just the same formula without the Ma Huang, to a fairly good result. Not as good as the traditional Gergen Tang / Kokonto, but yeah, again, aversion to cold, joint pain, stiff neck, first couple of days of cold and flu, brilliant.